following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcasts of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black.
Follow the leader.
Oh my God.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory. Glory.
I'm Tavis Smiley. Delighted to have you hanging out with us today on this King holiday. Dr. King would have been 95 years old today, and we are just grateful for his life and legacy, his work and witness, and especially grateful for you, again, listening to this program today as we celebrate the person I regard as the greatest American this country has ever produced. 2 more great hours in front of us. Just had a great hour with Cornel West. What an amazing dialogue with him. In our third hour, we'll be talking to USC professor Hajar Yazdiya about how the right wing has manipulated the legacy of Dr. King. Her book is called The Struggle for the People's King. We'll talk about that in hour 3. In this hour, in a moment, we'll commence a dialogue with American historian and Guggenheim Fellow Michael Honey, Professor Michael Honey, and our friend Bill Fletcher Jr., author, longtime trade unionist, and former head of Trans-Africa Forum. They take us on a deep dive into the lesser-known chapter of Dr. King's legacy, the champion, his championing, I should say, of workers' rights. After we do this, these are the words of Cornel West at a major rally in Washington, D.C. this weekend, where Dr. West did as only he can, linking King and Palestine. Take a listen.
Yes, it's indeed true that Brother Martin Luther King Jr. would have been 95 years old on Monday. And he, like myself, comes from a tradition of a great black people who have been hated and terrorized and traumatized for 400 years, but we still here fighting, we still here swinging. So I'm here to let my precious Palestinian brothers and sisters and siblings know that when I think of where I come from, for every generation, we have love warriors who are willing to live and who are willing to die. Martin Luther King Jr. said, I'd rather be dead than afraid. I'd rather be a corpse than a coward. We need courage. We need love and freedom in love. Don't let anybody lie on you and say that we here in the name of hatred. We don't hate anybody. We love Palestinians. We love oppressed people no matter where they are, any corner of the globe. They could be on the chocolate side of Washington, D.C. They could be Dalits in India. They could be landless peasants in Brazil. They can be indigenous peoples. They can be Iranians. They can be Iraqis. Anybody. This is a human thing we're here for. So when you hear all the lies that hide and conceal the crimes, remember what Brother Martin used to say, no lie can live forever. Truth crushed the earth shall rise again. I see it in your faces. I see it in your eyes. I see it in your hearts. I see it in your bodies. And oh, I wish you can see how beautiful you look. Isn't that the truth, my brother? Oh, yes. Beautiful you look. All the different colors and genders and cultures and sexual orientations and national identities. Why? Because you're here in the name of truth and justice, and we are going to raise our voices, put our bodies on the line, and yes, even go to jail and even die. We trying to have some space of morality and spirituality in a moment of overwhelming barbarity. And I can hear the voices of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. I can hear the voices of Claudia Jones. I can hear the voices of W.B. Du Bois. I can hear the voices of John Coltrane's Love Supreme. I can hear the voices of Curtis Mayfield. I can hear the voices of Gil Scott-Heron. They not just isolated names. They are forces in history that constitute our souls so that we can straighten our backs up. And Brother Martin used to say, anytime, every day people straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere, because folk can't ride your back unless it's bent. Our backs are straight. Our backs are ready. We are fortified. We ready to fight. We ready to resist with resilience. And that's why we call it for more than a ceasefire. We want an end to the siege. We want an end to the occupation. We want Palestinians to live a life of dignity. Am I going on too long? One last point. One last point. Because we're getting ready to march. Oh, yeah. But when I talk about free Palestine, and one of these days it's going to happen, I may not live to see it for myself, but I know I would have done all that I could to bear witness with every bone in my body. But I want that free Palestine to be a place where we're able to bring together human beings in such a way that, yes, we would be concerned about Jewish safety and security. Nobody's calling for the annihilation of Jewish brothers and sisters, but you'll never have Jewish security. You'll never have Jewish safety if you don't have Palestinian security, if you don't have Palestinian safety. That's what we're talking about. We want equality. We want equality. We want equality.
Nobody like him, independent candidate for president, Dr. Cornel West, our guest on this program in our first hour, and wanted to bring you some of the audio of his speech at a sizable rally this past weekend in the nation's capital. When we come forward and continue our salute to Dr. King, we'll be joined by Professor Michael Honey and our friend Bill Fletcher Jr. for a conversation about King and his work to always champion the rights of workers. You are listening, and I'm glad about it, to Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley.
Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Girl, I have a secret. When I get stressed out, I get sweaty. That's why I use Secret Clinical Antiperspirant. It's like my own secret weapon. For 72 hours, I get Secret's strongest protection against sweat caused by stress, heat, and activity, because you know how crazy life can get. Plus, it's made with advanced odor fighters that don't just cover up smelliness. They help prevent it from happening in the first place. Believe me, if I weren't wearing Secret, I'd be a hot, smelly mess. Thankfully, Secret works. Did you know that feeling sluggish or weighed down could be a sign that your digestive system isn't working at its best? Taking Metamucil every day can help. Metamucil fiber powders help promote your daily digestive health using a plant-based fiber called psyllium. The gelling action of this special fiber traps and removes waste, so you can feel lighter and more energetic. Metamucil, promoting digestive health for a better you. Learn more at metamucil.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of This Light of Ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This Light of Ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This Light of Ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
More honesty than you can handle.
More empowerment than you can imagine.
You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
In this hour, we continue our tribute to the greatest American this country's ever produced, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I am delighted to be joined by 2 great Americans. One is an American historian and Guggenheim Fellow. His name is Michael Honey, and I'm honored to have him back on this program. Professor Honey, how are you today, sir?
I'm good. Very nice to talk to you, Tavis, and I look forward to hearing Bill Fletcher, too.
It's good to hear your voice again. I look forward to hearing Bill's voice as well. Speaking of Bill Fletcher Jr., he's an author, longtime trade unionist, and former head of Trans Advocate Forum. Delighted to have Bill on as well to take us into a deep dive into the lesser-known chapter of Dr. King's legacy, his championing of workers' rights, and his vision for economic justice alongside racial equality. Bill Fletcher, Happy New Year. Good to hear your voice again as well. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on. And I'm great to be sharing time with Michael Honey.
Well, it's a mutual admiration society. We all love and respect each other. I look forward to a great dialogue in this hour. Michael, let me. I'm sorry. Michael, let me start with you. Your thoughts. I said last hour, and I've said before on this program, that to my mind, with all due respect to Taylor Swift, the person of the year that should have made the cover of Time at the end of 2023 was not Taylor Swift, but Labor. Labor had a heck of a year. It's been a long time that I can recall that Labor had quite the year that they had last year. Before I jump in this conversation about Dr. King and Labor, your thoughts on the year that was for the labor movement and what it means.
I'd be especially interested to hear what Bill Fletcher says about this, but I'm from Michigan originally and grew up, my parents are from Detroit, so the United Auto Workers is a big thing in our history. And we went through a period in Michigan of losing a lot of those jobs, and Michigan even passed a right-to-work law, which means basically it's undercutting unions completely. So things look really dismal, and then up comes this change, and it was done through partly people at Labor Notes and other, sort of left people who were analyzing the situation over many years about the give back bargaining was killing the union, and people were alienated, and they went through a big election process, and out of that came Shawn Fain, somebody that I knew nothing about from Kokomo, Indiana. Mm-hmm. And here he comes up with this brilliant strategy of striking the profit centers and all 3 big industries, but without letting them know what's going to happen exactly. It was a brilliant strategy, and now he's talking about trying to get unions to all bargain their contracts at the same time, as many as possible. So suddenly there's a surge of great hope in organizing. And I know in Tennessee, most of my research is on King and the Southern movement, and I lived in Tennessee for 6 years. There's a plant that's going to be built in the Memphis area, a Ford plant. In 1937, the Ford plant was beating up the organizers in Memphis, and coming up now, I'm optimistic that this thing will get unionized despite right to work in Tennessee. So I'm looking at a good picture, I think, for unions.
You mentioned Sean Fain. I am from Kokomo, Indiana. I grew up there. And I never heard of Sean Fain. And when I started reading these stories like you, this guy's from Kokomo, Indiana, I said, what? Another guy from Kokomo? So at least there are two folk you now know, Michael Honey, from Kokomo, Indiana. One is Tavis Smiley, and one is Sean Fain. That said, Bill Fletcher, Bill Fletcher Jr. to be exact, what do you make of the year that labor had, and what do you think that year means going forward, if anything?
Well, I think it's been great, and I think that it's been building since 2011. And when you look at 2011, and you look at the Occupy movement, when you look at what's called the Madison Uprising that took place, from that point on, you're starting to see something moving, this motion that becomes very important. You have the reform movement in the UAW. You have the change in the leadership in the Teamsters. So, and you also have a lot of grassroots organizing, some of which was very much affected by the pandemic. The Starbucks organizing, the Walmart organizing, the Amazon organizing. So a lot of things have been in motion and have crested in a way where there is amazing public support for unions, almost an unprecedented level of public support. Now, having said that, Tavis, it's really important for people to appreciate that we can't stop here, and that there need to be broader strategies and demands. And there's some areas of concern. When, for example, you have the president of the Teamsters Union sitting down with Donald Trump, this is not a good sign. Sean Fain from the UAW said that he had nothing to say to Trump, right? And O'Brien from the Teamsters should have said the same thing. And what it's starting to feel like is that O'Brien wants to act like the Jimmy Hoffa of trying to cut deals with Nixon. And this is very dangerous, particularly given what Donald Trump represents and what the Republican Party represents today.
Why do you think, then, that the head of the Teamsters did, in fact, head to a meeting with Donald Trump? Like, what would you say? If you're the head of the Teamsters, what would you say to Donald Trump in a meeting? Like, why take the meeting?
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't meet with him. But why he did it, I suspect that what's going on is that he does not think the danger of Trump is as serious as many of the rest of us do, and that he believes that he can cut a deal with Trump to preserve the Teamsters, despite all indications and evidence of Donald Trump's practice, that this is not someone who is pro-union in the least.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that I hate to say it, but I think it's a form of opportunism.
You have any thoughts on that, Michael, before I move forward on why the Teamsters Sean Fain at UAW would not meet with Donald Trump? You have any insight or any thoughts, at least, on why the Teamsters would meet with Donald Trump?
Well, I think what Bill said is absolutely right. He thinks he can cut some kind of deal. And we've seen, the full politics of Trumpism are completely anti-union, and the Republican Party completely anti-union. And we know all of that. And Trump's response to the Biden going on the picket line was to go to a non-union plant or an anti-union plant and tell the workers they should put pressure on China, not on the auto companies in the United States. I mean, he bankrupted himself right in front of our eyes as far as unions are concerned.
Mm-hmm. Let me go straight away now into. I want to just start this conversation just talking about labor writ large in this country and where we think labor is at this moment in 2024. Again, quite the year in 2023. We shall see whether or not that is sustainable and whether or not that continues to grow and to expand in this year and the years to come. I pray so. That said, let me now look back as we celebrate the legacy of Dr. King today. Michael Honey, I'll let you get this part of the conversation started. and I don't want to ask a question too specific, so I'll give you a broad palette to paint on here. Talk to me about King and his work to champion the rights of workers. Let me just, before you say that, let me just say that you'll appreciate hearing this story, Michael, honey. I know Bill will as well. Last night here in Los Angeles, I was with our mutual friend, Reverend James Lawson. Reverend Lawson last night was presented last night at the annual King Dinner that we have here in Los Angeles. This program is heard across the country in syndication, but I'm based in L.A., as you know, and last night in L.A., we had our annual King Dinner. I was with Reverend Lawson just last night. He and I spent some good time at our table talking over dinner last night, but it was just great to see him now 95 years old. Dr. King, in fact, would be 95 today on his birthday where he's still living. But I was with Reverend Lawson last night. For those who don't know the name, James Lawson, Reverend Lawson was in Memphis at the time pastoring a church, and he is the one who invited Dr. King to Memphis to march with the sanitation workers. He and Dr. King were dear friends, and at his invitation, Dr. King came to Memphis to march with these sanitation workers wearing those signs around their necks, "I am a man, I am a man." Reverend Lawson was the one who made the entreaty to Dr. King to come to Memphis, and I know for years, based on our conversations, had a hard time processing what it meant that he was the one that invited Martin to Memphis, where, of course, he was assassinated. He said to me many times, Martin wanted to be there, he wanted to come, but he had a hard time sort of processing psychologically that he was the one that invited King to Memphis. That said, Michael, honey, talk to me about King and his effort to always advance the rights of workers.
Well, I think I'd like to pick up two strands of this. One is James Lawson. I've worked with him quite a lot on different projects. Made a film with him called Love and Solidarity, and we have a new book that is James Lawson's lectures on revolutionary nonviolence organizing for freedom. That's at University of California Press. And in there, he tells you the steps of nonviolence organizing. And what he contends is that nonviolence organizing is far more effective than any kind of armed action that anybody could take, short of maybe individual self-defense when somebody's attacking you. But in mass movements, nonviolence has both a philosophy that brings people together and a method. And, of course, that's what Dr. King was all about also. So it's both the analysis and the method. And people need to pick up on this and learn it. And in California, they're now setting up teaching for next year, K through 12, on the history of the civil rights movement and what John Lewis called the nonviolence movement. And it's very much tied to labor in the later stages from Memphis in '68 onward. But second point is that Dr. King was tied in with unions all along, right from the Montgomery bus boycott onward. He had support from unions, particularly the unions, and Bill would know these ones, that had been in the CIO and had left-wing, civil rights conscious leadership. And those unions came to his support right away, and not just to him, but to the movement in Montgomery. And they continued to support King all along. And so I think when King came to Memphis and made that amazing March 18 speech where he called for a general strike, only somebody with that, both his spiritual framework and his experience in knowing and working with labor people, only that would allow somebody to make such a bold demand. And so I've written a lot about King and labor, but it's important for people to realize that this is all part of the civil rights and freedom movement.
Yep. I've got 2 minutes here before we come forward. Bill Fletcher Jr., we can continue, but let me just get you started on this, and again, we'll pick up on it in a moment. What was it about King's message that you think, Bill Fletcher, that resonated with labor? Not everybody was down with Martin, as we know. Why was labor in his camp?
Because Dr. King recognized race and class, and this is one of the things, Tavis, that has happened. The way that history and King in specific has been whited out. That King's linking of race and class, the struggle for economic justice, being central. His post-1966 sort of refocusing his efforts on economic and global injustice. These are things that have been blocked out. So many people only think of King as a race man, as a civil rights person, and don't see that, as Michael was saying, from the giddy-up, Dr. King was pro-labor and would give speeches regularly to unions and union conventions, essentially emphasizing the need for unions to unite with the black freedom movement.
When we come forward, something occurs to me now, Bill Fletcher, that I've never asked, and I want to ask it of you when we come forward and get Michael's take on it as well, Michael Honey's take. And that is that Dr. King, from the very beginning, as Michael Honey established and you echoed, was always in support of labor. He was always down with labor and always used his bully pulpit, his platform, to champion workers' rights. And yet, if you know King's backstory, as some of us do, he was a middle-class Negro. I mean, King grew up very upper middle class in Atlanta, and it's not always easy for people who grow up with with a silver spoon in their mouth. And King was by no means wealthy; his family was not wealthy, but he was an upper middle class, part of an upper middle class Negro family. And for somebody in that moment, growing up the way he grew up in the neighborhood he grew up in Atlanta, to be immediately down with everyday people, down with workers, down with laborers, is something I've never really explored before. We're going to explore it when we come forward with Bill Fletcher Jr. and Michael Honey, who you're listening to right now as we celebrate King on this holiday on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Thank you for joining us on this MLK Day. I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. In Kentucky, Louisville is celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day despite the bad weather. Governor Beshear joined Mayor Greenberg Sunday for the Keeper of the Dream program, which featured multiple performances highlighting Black joy and Dr. King's vision. Mayor Greenberg awarded the 2024 Freedom Awards to African Americans Carol Jones Clay and Senator Gerald Neal for their community service. The principal, who was wounded during a shooting at an Iowa high school earlier this month, has died. According to a post on a GoFundMe page to help with medical expenses, Perry High School principal Dan Marburger died Sunday morning. Marburger had been principal at the Des Moines area school for nearly 3 decades. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
For victims of drunk and drug driving, our grief is unique. But you are not alone. You always have a place at MAD. Call our 24-hour victim helpline at 877-MAD-HELP or visit mad.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A very busy sports Sunday. We start with the Rams. Impressive performance at Detroit, but they lose by 1. The Rams finished the season at 10-8. Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua set an NFL record for most receiving yards for a rookie. 181 yards on 9 catches and 1 touchdown. The Chargers are in the news. They will be the first NFL team to interview Michigan coach Jim Harbaugh for their head coach position. The two sides are getting together in the next couple of days. The Clippers lose by 4 at Minnesota, 26 points for Kawhi Leonard. USC's women's basketball team handed UCLA their first loss of the season. The second-ranked Bruins lost by 8 in front of a sellout crowd at Galen Center. They were 14-0. USC freshman guard Juju Watkins had a game-high 32 points. The 5th time this season, Watkins has scored 30 or more. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like your style, dog.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
The Crohn's and Colitis Foundation has been at the forefront of inflammatory bowel disease research and care for over 50 years. Learn more about research, education, and support at Crohn'sColitisFoundation.org.
Skincare is self-care, and with daily beauty steals of 50% off during Ulta Beauty's Love Your Skin event, I can find everything I need to make loving my skin a daily practice, from brands like Osea, Lancome, and Tula. And I can shop weekly skin and wellness deals of 30% off more must-have brands. Plus, see what's new from brands like Bubble and in select stores, Sol de Janeiro and Ulla Henriksen. Hurry, event ends January 20th. Shop in store, online, or try pickup today. Ulta Beauty. The possibilities are beautiful. Conditions apply.
Eggs are a staple in our diets, and there's only one egg with more delicious farm fresh taste plus superior nutrition. Eggland's Best. With more vitamins, including 6 times more vitamin D and 10 times more vitamin E, plus 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Available in so many delicious varieties. Classic, cage-free, and organic. Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
Jackson Hewitt has a plan to get your tax refund fast with a buck here, buck there. Here a buck, there a buck, everywhere a buck.
You don't have to wait weeks for your tax refund. Get money sooner with a no-fee refund advance loan at Jackson Hewitt.
On this loan, there's a money today guarantee. E-I-E-I-DO.
Don't settle for chicken feed. Get fast bucks at Jackson Hewitt today. No-fee refund advance loans by Republic Bank offered to eligible clients. Money today guarantee if approved for a loan on a prepaid card. Details at jacksonhewitt.com.
My ride smells just right, just right, just right, just right.
Y'all gotta try that Febreze car.
Just right, just right, just right, yeah. La 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 la. With up to 40 days of consistency, all low Febreze car clips right on your vent. You know my car's my happy place. Keep that smile on my face when it smells just right, just right, just right. Yeah, breathe happy Febreze. La 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 la.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley in conversation with American historian and Guggenheim Fellow, Professor Michael Honey, and author, longtime trade unionist, and former head of Trans-Africa Forum, Bill Fletcher Jr., as we continue talking about this not-so-well-known part of King's legacy. His always fighting, always championing the rights of workers alongside his vision for economic justice and racial equality. We'll continue that dialogue in a moment. We were talking earlier about the UAW and just workers writ large across the country and the year they had last year. On the one hand, on the other hand, we had Dr. Cornel West on this program earlier today. and he weaves quite brilliantly King and his work and witness alongside or with what's happening in real time in the Middle East. Only Dr. West could do it in the way that he did it, linking MLK and what we see happening in real time in Gaza, in Palestine, with this Israel-Hamas war that continues unabated. So that Michael Honey, again, mentioned Shawn Fain earlier. Shawn Fain is the president, as you well know, of United Auto Workers, and was able to successfully push back against the Big Three last year in a major set of victories for labor. But he is not shy at all, as Dr. King linked his work to what was happening in parts around the globe. Shawn Fain is not shy about doing likewise. Take a listen. This clip is kind of bold. It shows rather how bold Shawn Fain is. This is Shawn Fain, president of the UAW, speaking alongside progressive Congress members at a news conference. Listen to what he had to say.
We cannot bomb our way to peace.
That's right. No.
The only path forward is to build peace and social justice is through a ceasefire. As union members, we know we must fight for all workers and suffering people around the world. We must fight for humanity. That means we must restore people's basic rights and allow water, food,
Yes.
fuel,
Right, that's right.
humanitarian aid to enter Gaza.
That sounds pretty Kingian to me, Bill Fletcher Jr. How about you?
I mean, the thing about King that, again, was part of the effort to change his legacy was the denying of how consistently King was, in fact, an internationalist.
Mm-hmm.
And that he was in a very proud tradition of black internationalism. Again, the focus of mainstream opinion on King has always been about domestic issues. King was never restricted to that.
Mm-hmm.
His breakthrough, in some ways, that shattered the way many liberals and certainly conservatives viewed him, was, of course, when he came out against the Vietnam War very openly.
Sure.
And I think the thing that we have to understand is that, much like Malcolm X and many other great leaders, King appreciated that there is no justice in the United States. There's no separate peace if the United States is engaged in atrocities globally. That you can't try to build some sort of wall around the conditions, in this case of African Americans in the United States, and believe that we should be silent when we see what's happening in Palestine, Western Sahara, Ukraine, or any number of other places. And I think that's why the linkage is a good one.
Yeah. No, Shawn Fain, to me, clearly sounds Kingian, took a page right out of King's playbook. But to have a union leader who is that bold in a moment like this, where this is so controversial, to express himself so boldly in the way that he did was pretty amazing to hear. Again, that was the voice of Shawn Fain, head of the UAW, linking the work that he does on behalf of workers in this country with what's happening in the Middle East. Pretty powerful audio there that I wanted to share with you. Michael, I asked you this first, and then we'll get Bill to sound off on it as well. And again, I've never really kind of explored this line of questioning, but it occurred to me as you and Bill were talking to me earlier about King always standing with unions from the very start, from the very beginning of his advocacy. Of course, he's dead at the age of 39, but so he starts very young, of course. But even at the very outset or onset of his advocacy, he was always down with labor, always using his pulpit to demand the best for labor, which is really fascinating when you consider the fact he's an upper middle class Negro. That's how he's raised in Atlanta. But to be so connected with everyday people, and including, of course, those sanitation workers for whom he, gave his life in Memphis, it's pretty astonishing when you think about it in that way, particularly given that we always find ourselves, maybe not enough, in these conversations, Michael, about class in this country. King grows up in one class, but he's representing another class. How do you read that? What do you make of that reality?
Well, actually, I've visited his neighborhood a number of times, and I was thinking back to what that neighborhood was probably like in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
And although King grew up in a nice household, around him was a lot of devastation. It was the Great Depression, and he's born at the beginning of the Great Depression. His father, although he was middle class oriented, had grown up in a family of sharecroppers and day laborers, and before that, King's family were slaves. So there was that train of reality and his understanding, and so he grew up seeing, and he talks about this in some of his writings. He grew up seeing poor people and what it was really like.
Yeah.
So, despite his kind of privilege, which is what he saw it as, he was very conscious of what was happening with most people. And secondly is the black social gospel, which his father imbued in him, and everybody, Benjamin Mays, all the people he studied with, Thurmond, you name it. The black social gospel was about the poor and lifting up the poor and paying attention to the social conditions of poverty. And this was all shaped in his early life in the 1930s when he's still a kid, basically.
Yeah.
Then World War II, this really strong anti-imperialist, framework at Morehouse, every place in black academia, he was also imbibing that. So by long before, actually, Montgomery, he had this very strong global and class sort of view.
Let me get your take on that, Bill Fletcher Jr. After I share the following, which is just to add a little bit more to this. So King is in fact privileged, as Michael Honey lays out. So much so that he has degrees. He goes to some of the best schools in this country. He goes to Morehouse. He's got a PhD from BU. So this guy is educated. He's grown up in a well-to-do family. You may recall, Bill Fletcher, that he was oftentimes chided. I wrote about this in my Death of a King book. He was often chided by well-to-do Negroes of the era, including middle-class Negroes who ran some of these major civil rights organizations, including, if I can just keep it real, Thurgood Marshall, Supreme Court Justice. They would laugh at Martin and mock him from time to time about these overalls. He'd be out there wearing overalls, marching with workers and everyday people, and they knew that was not his upbringing, so they got a good laugh out of that every now and then, to be honest with you. I write about this once again in the book Death of a King. This is real stuff here. But for a guy who had that kind of privilege and that kind of background, to be so connected with everyday people is fascinating to me. We'll get Bill Fletcher Jr.'s take on that when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Jim Gaffigan here with some more Straight Talk. Let's take a moment to appreciate our sweet children, loving grandparents, and eternal soulmates. Now let's use them to save money on wireless. Because with the Straight Talk Silver Plan, you get 4 lines for just $25 a month with unlimited data and no contracts. So add those human pawns, loved ones, and save money. Thanks, kids. They're finally worth it. Straight Talk Wireless, available at Walmart.
Get 4 lines on Silver Unlimited for $25 per line per month, plus taxes and fees. For data management practices and additional terms, visit straighttalk.com.
Mr. Clean.
Of course I use Mr. Clean Magic Eraser to clean tough messes off my stovetop and bathtub. But then I discovered I can also use it to easily clean my patio furniture and even my shoes. I'm hooked.
And when wipes won't cut it, I use Magic Eraser Sheets. They're thin and flexible erasers, perfect for everyday messes, like gunk on my counters and sinks. They really are magical.
The reviews are in. Mr. Clean Magic Eraser and Sheets make cleaning look easy.
Taco Bell just dropped the new Cravings Value Menu. Now you can get 10 items for $3 or less, which means you can get the food you want for the price you want. It's almost like you can have your cake and eat it too. But in this case, it's a double-stacked taco from the new Cravings Value Menu. So basically, you can have your double-stacked taco and eat it too, which is a lot crunchier than cake. The new Cravings Value Menu is here. Get it at Taco Bell today. At participating U.S. Taco Bell locations while supplies last. Contact store for price and participation which vary. Tax extra.
Jim was at the laundromat when he heard. His ear said, "Maraca, senor," but his nose said, "Hey, freshest scent ever." Following his nose, Jim found a man pouring Gain scent beads into the washer. The scent, the freshness. Jim blurted, "Sir, your scent maracas smell amazing." You could call them scent maracas, but most noses call them Gain scent beads. Try Gain scent beads. Way fresher than detergent alone.
Made fresh daily in Leimert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Bill Fletcher Jr. As he responds to the question I posed a moment ago as to how he processes that king, middle-class, privileged Negro, educated at the best schools, Ph.D., pastor of a couple of amazing churches, walking around wearing overalls, marching with poor people, marching with everyday laborers. He was mocked by some for that, Bill Fletcher. What do you make of it?
I make of it what Michael was raising about the social gospel. I think that the two very different interpretations of the life and work of Jesus and Jesus' purpose are really at play. Whether Jesus was someone simply to be worshipped but not followed, or whether Jesus was someone whose path should be followed. And I think that Dr. King followed the path. He followed the path of a revolutionary. He followed the path of someone who took up for the dispossessed, the marginalized. And I think it's that which is critical to understand. So, I mean, he truly internalized that. And unfortunately, there are too many people, including within Black America, who look at Jesus as more of an idol than someone whose path should be followed, should be replicated.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways to follow Dr. King is really to follow the path that Jesus was laying out.
Yeah. Martin said it more than once. Dr. King said it more than once. He said, "I love Jesus Christ. It's these Christians." I love Jesus Christ. It's these Christians I have difficulty dealing with sometimes. Let me ask you right quick here, Bill Fletcher Jr. In real time, how do we best link, as King did then, how do we in late modernity right now link economic justice with racial equality? How do we do that?
I think a number of different things. One is that we need unions. That is, we need organization that is of workers that take up these fights. And the fights, whether in the workplace or in industry as a whole, need to incorporate not just wages, hours, and working conditions, but need to take up social justice issues. And here's one of the things that's interesting, Tavis, because it relates to an earlier question you raised. In the union movement, you have a history of unions that took up international issues and took the right side on international issues. And in the union movement, you've had the unions that have taken the side in the fight around racial justice. So, and there's great examples, whether you're looking at unions like the Packing House Workers, which is now part of the United Food and Commercial Workers, which during their heyday fought against racial discrimination in hiring. They basically took on the employers around that, or unions that actually deployed shop stewards and staff to help to build community-based organizations in various communities, including the Black community. So the connection between racial justice and economic justice is obvious.
Yes.
I think in some ways it's when you have people, you have white supremacist unionism that gets introduced, where where people are being told, no, we're not going to deal with racial segregation in our workplace. We're not going to deal with housing issues. We're only going to deal with wages, hours, and working conditions.
Yeah.
That's the problem that we have to take on.
Nope, I hear you loud and clear. That makes perfect sense to me, beautifully articulated. Our remaining moments with Bill Fletcher Jr. and Michael Honey when we come forward on this King Day on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles is a nonprofit law firm that protects and advances the rights of the most underserved, leveling the playing field and ensuring that everyone can have access to the justice system. Every year, LAFLA provides free, high-quality legal services to more than 100,000 people living in poverty across greater Los Angeles. Their unique combination of neighborhood offices, self-help centers at courthouses, and domestic violence clinics puts Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles on the front lines in vulnerable communities and at the forefront of change. LAFLA's expert team of attorneys, paralegals, and support staff works to provide direct representation, offer counsel and advice, provide referrals, and educate the community about their legal rights through workshops and seminars. With locations all over LA, you can access their services or volunteer to help no matter where you live. And if you have an urgent issue, call 213-235-0060. That's 213-235-0060. To get legal help, make a donation, or volunteer, visit lafla.org. lafla.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so, as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
When we learn the power of hope, recovery is possible. Find out how at startwithhope.com. Brought to you by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Shatterproof, and the Ad Council.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
Got about 4 minutes left. I'll split it 2 and 2. Michael Honey, you first. Your closing thoughts on the enduring legacy of MLK and his work to always advance the rights of workers.
Stokely Carmichael made an interesting comment during the March on Fear in Mississippi. He said he never saw King more relaxed and more happy than in that march when he was dealing with poor people every day. And you can see that in his tours through Mississippi leading into the Poor People's Campaign. Another great example, he comes back from the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo to go out on a picket line with Scripto workers in his neighborhood, 800 Black women, 1964-65. And because of his participation, they won their strike. Everybody wondered, where did Dr. King go? Oh, he went out on strike for these people. So it was a very felt thing with him. It was not just an abstract idea. And they, at the end of his life, they were constantly talking about, where do we go from here?
Yes.
Chaos or community? Yep. We just had a beautiful conference at the University of Washington about Jack Odell, who worked with and for Dr. King. And in his writings, what he says is the key thing is knowing the past in order to know where do we go from here.
Yes.
And Bill's a great example of doing that. And then having analysis and being able to really make sense of how to build mass coalitions. And that, I think a lot of people don't quite get that. That is a key to Martin's success, building mass coalitions.
Last word to you, Bill Fletcher Jr.
A friend of mine said, Tavis, the other day that they're glad that Dr. King didn't have Twitter. And I think that's one of the things I would walk away from with this conversation. The King was about building movements and about organization. He wasn't just about shouting at oppression. And we have too many people now that seem to think that political action is about tweeting, texting, posting on Instagram, etc., as opposed to that we need to organize millions of people to fight for justice. If that's the legacy for me, for King.
Does it have to be either or, Bill, or can it be both and? And I ask that because
No, it's both.
Yeah, it's both. Yeah, exactly.
It's both. But see, I guess, forgive me. I'm glad you said that, Tavis. Forgive me, because see, part of it is that I see too many people who think it's only about social media, right? And as opposed, see, the right wing understands. They actually understand direct one-on-one organizing supplemented, added to by social media. But many of us, unfortunately, think all we need to do is to take a stand, post something on Twitter, and that's it. And no.
Point well taken. Point well taken. As stated succinctly by our friend Bill Fletcher Jr., author, longtime trade unionist, and former head of Trans-Africa Forum. Bill, thank you for your insights, man. Honored and delighted to have had you on this program. Happy King Day to you, and all the best of this year to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Michael Honey, happy King Day to you as well. Hope you have a great rest of the year as well. I always appreciate your insights. Thank you for your time, Professor.
Thanks very much, Tavis. It's been a great pleasure.
Good to have you on.
And privilege.
Yes, for me as well. For me as well. When we come forward, we'll talk about how the right wing has manipulated the legacy of Dr. King Jr., particularly Dr. King and his words especially. The book is called The Struggle for the People's King, and we'll talk to the author of that book when we come forward on Tavis Smile.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.